The gavel slammed down before Vivian Cole had even finished her first sentence. "Enough?" Judge Harold Prescott said, leaning back in his tall leather chair with a smile that made the whole courtroom colder. "I have heard enough from you." Vivian stood alone at the small wooden table, her hands folded over a thin folder, her plain gray coat buttoned to her neck. She had not shouted. She had not interrupted. She had not disrespected the court. All she had done was ask to present documents in a minor property dispute. But Judge Prescott looked at her like she had walked into the wrong building. A few people in the back row shifted uncomfortably. An older man near the aisle lowered his eyes. A young mother hugged her purse tighter. Everyone could feel what was happening, but nobody said a word. Prescott glanced over his glasses and let out a soft laugh. "Miss Cole," he said slowly, making sure every person in the room heard him, "this court is not a place for emotional speeches. It is not a place for people to come in, wave papers around, and pretend they understand the law." A quiet gasp moved through the courtroom. Vivian looked up. "I am not pretending, Your Honor," she said. The judge's smile disappeared. "What did you say?" Vivian's voice stayed calm. "I said I am not pretending. I have evidence that the property record was altered." The opposing attorney, a polished man in an expensive navy suit, smirked like he had already won. He leaned toward his client, a real estate investor named Martin Vale, and whispered something that made Vale chuckle. Judge Prescott heard the chuckle and seemed to enjoy it. "Altered," Prescott repeated. "That is a serious accusation from someone who appears to have no legal representation, no understanding of procedure, and no realistic chance of winning this case." Vivian's fingers tightened slightly around the folder. Behind her, someone whispered, "That's not right." The judge snapped his eyes toward the gallery. "Another sound from the public section and I will clear this courtroom." Silence dropped instantly. Prescott turned back to Vivian. "You are delaying this court. You are wasting valuable time. And frankly, Miss Cole, you are embarrassing yourself." The words hit the room like a slap. Vivian did not move. She had heard worse in boardrooms. She had heard worse in school offices. She had heard worse from bankers, landlords, and men who thought power belonged only to people who looked like them. But this was different. This was public. This was calculated. This was the kind of humiliation meant to break someone before the fight even began. The judge picked up a paper from his desk without reading it. "Based on the filings in front of me, I am prepared to rule in favor of Mr. Vale." Vivian took one step forward. "Your Honor, you have not looked at my evidence." Prescott's face hardened. "Do not tell me how to run my courtroom. I am asking you to look at the record. You are asking because you do not like the outcome." "No," Vivian said. "I am asking because the outcome was arranged before I walked in." The whole courtroom froze. The opposing attorney stood quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. That is outrageous." Prescott's cheeks reddened. "Miss Cole, you are very close to contempt." Vivian held his stare. "Then maybe contempt is what happens when the truth is spoken in a room built to silence it." For the first time, Prescott looked less amused. Then his hand moved toward the gavel again. "Bailiff," he said, his voice low, "remove her from my courtroom." And as the bailiff stepped toward Vivian, the courtroom doors opened behind them with a sound that made every head turn. A woman in a dark suit entered quietly, carrying a sealed envelope with a gold legal stamp. She did not speak. She did not rush. She only walked halfway down the aisle and stopped, her eyes fixed on Vivian. Judge Prescott looked irritated. "Who are you?" The woman did not answer him right away. Instead, she gave Vivian the smallest nod, as if they had been waiting for this exact moment. Vivian stayed still. The bailiff paused beside her. To everyone in that courtroom, Vivian looked like an ordinary woman who had come to fight over a small piece of land. Her coat was simple. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She wore no jewelry except a thin silver bracelet. There was nothing loud about her. Nothing flashy. Nothing that announced money or power. That was exactly why Judge Prescott had dismissed her. But what he did not know was that Vivian had learned a long time ago that the loudest person in the room was rarely the strongest. She had grown up 3 blocks from that courthouse, in a narrow brick house with cracked steps and a roof that leaked every winter. Her mother, Lorraine Cole, had worked 2 jobs and still lost that home after a property judgment she never understood. Back then, Vivian was only 16. She remembered standing beside her mother in a courtroom just like this one, watching a judge speak over her, rush her, and rule against her in less than 6 minutes. Her mother had cried on the courthouse steps, holding a box of papers no one had bothered to read. Vivian never forgot that sound. Not the crying. The silence afterward. The silence of neighbors who were afraid. The silence of lawyers who would not take the case. The silence of a system that looked at her mother and saw someone easy to erase. Years later, Vivian built a life out of that silence. She studied harder than everyone around her. She listened when people thought she did not understand. She entered rooms where nobody expected her to belong and left those rooms owning the decisions made inside them. But she had never stopped watching this courthouse. Judge Harold Prescott had been on the bench for 22 years. To the public, he was respected. To campaign donors, he was useful. To powerful developers, he was predictable. But to families in the South District, he was a storm cloud over their lives. Homes disappeared after hearings. Small businesses vanished after rulings. Property lines shifted. Debts appeared. And somehow, the same group of investors always benefited. Vivian had followed the pattern quietly. She collected stories. She found old case numbers. She paid for searches nobody knew about. She waited until the trail was strong enough that it could not be dismissed as anger, or grief, or coincidence. Still, in that moment, to the people watching, she looked alone. The woman in the aisle raised the envelope. "Your Honor," she said, "this document must be entered before any ruling is issued." Prescott's eyes narrowed. "This court is already in session. You do not walk in here and interrupt proceedings." Vivian finally turned slightly. "Let her speak," she said. The judge laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "You are in no position to give instructions." Vivian looked down at her folder, then back at him. Her voice was soft. "That is what everyone keeps assuming." And inside the sealed envelope was the first clue that everything Judge Prescott believed about her was wrong. Judge Prescott waved toward the woman in the aisle like she was a delivery person who had entered the wrong office. "Take that envelope to the clerk and sit down," he said. "Or leave." The woman did not move. The clerk, a nervous middle-aged man named Daniel Price, looked from the judge to the envelope. Sweat had already gathered near his hairline. He knew the gold stamp on that seal. He knew it was not ordinary. More importantly, he knew Judge Prescott had not seen it yet. Vivian noticed the clerk's fear. So did Prescott. "Mr. Price?" the judge barked. "Do your job." The clerk stood and walked toward the aisle. His hand trembled as he reached for the envelope. The woman gave it to him, but her eyes stayed on Vivian. Prescott turned back to the courtroom. "Let the record show," he said loudly, "that Miss Cole has attempted to disrupt this hearing with theatrics, accusations, and now strangers entering my courtroom." "I did not arrange theatrics," Vivian said. "No," Prescott snapped. "You arranged a circus." Martin Vale laughed under his breath. The opposing attorney, Calvin Rusk, stood again. "Your Honor, my client has been patient. This property transfer has been delayed for months because Miss Cole refuses to accept the legal reality. We request immediate judgment, removal from the property, and sanctions for abuse of process." Vivian looked toward him. "Your client purchased a property that was never legally available for sale." Rusk smiled. "That is your fantasy." "No," Vivian said. "That is the record." Prescott leaned forward. His face had changed now. The public smile was gone. What remained was anger. "Miss Cole, you have been warned. I have been interrupted. You have been indulged. I have been dismissed." The courtroom breathed in all at once. Prescott lifted